The courtroom was already tense before it began. Marble columns towered above the chamber, their cold stone reflecting the quiet hum of cameras setting up for what had already been called the hearing of the decade. At the center of it all, Justice Samuel Alito, known for his rigid interpretations of the Constitution, and standing before him, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, sharp, composed, and visibly unafraid. For weeks, the nation had waited for this moment. Crockett had accused the Supreme Court of turning a blind eye to partisan manipulation in state voting laws. Today, she was here to prove that accusation directly to the justices themselves. When the session opened, the courtroom felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a clash of ideals. Congresswoman Crockett, Chief Justice Roberts began, "You may proceed with your statement." Jasmine Crockett adjusted the microphone. "Thank you, Chief Justice. My statement is simple. The Constitution was written to serve the people, not to shield power from accountability." Her tone was calm, but the tension underneath was unmistakable. Justice Alito leaned back, expression unreadable. Crockett continued, "Over the last decade, states have passed laws under the guise of election integrity. Yet the data shows one consistent effect: the selective suppression of marginalized voters." Before she could continue, Alito interrupted. "Congresswoman, that's a political claim, not a constitutional argument." Crockett looked directly at him. "With respect, Justice Alito, the Constitution becomes political the moment its promises are selectively applied," the gallery murmured. Even the clerks paused their typing. She walked toward the bench, holding a small folder. "Let's discuss the 15th Amendment, ratified after one of the darkest chapters in our history. It doesn't say the right to vote shall not be unreasonably denied. It says it shall not be denied, period." Alito interjected again. "Intent matters, Congresswoman. You can't claim discrimination without proof of intent." Her eyes narrowed. "Intent?" she repeated. "With respect, Your Honor, discrimination doesn't always leave a confession note. When 80% of polling place closures occur in minority districts, that's not coincidence. That's consequence." The tension thickened. Justice Kagan glanced toward Alito, recognizing his growing impatience. But Crockett didn't waver. She laid 3 documents on the lectern: old maps of redistricted counties, voter roll statistics, and a line from an earlier Supreme Court decision. This court once said, "The Constitution is colorblind." She paused. "But when the map itself is drawn to hide color behind lines, what does blindness achieve except ignorance?" Justice Alito's brow furrowed. "That's rhetoric, not law." Crockett's tone sharpened. "No, Justice. That's reality." Her words cut through the chamber like glass. She turned to the bench, her voice steady. When the Reconstruction Congress wrote these amendments, they knew states would find new ways to suppress rights under old names. That's why they gave the power of enforcement to the federal government. Alito leaned forward. "And you believe Congress should override state election laws entirely?" Crockett didn't hesitate. "I believe Congress should do what the Constitution commands when the states refuse. Protect the right to vote," the audience whispered. Reporters scribbled furiously. Justice Barrett, who had been silent, interjected softly. "Congresswoman, some would argue that expanding federal control risks politicizing elections even further." Crockett nodded respectfully. "I understand that concern, Justice Barrett. But politicization already exists in every law that counts certain votes as inconveniences. You can't depoliticize injustice by ignoring it." The Chief Justice glanced across the bench. "Please proceed," he said quietly. Crockett picked up a slim, worn book, a copy of the original congressional record from 1870. "These are the debates that created the 15th Amendment," she said, "and they foresaw this exact argument. Senator Henry Wilson warned, and I quote, 'When states act to nullify the right to vote, the nation itself must respond.'" She closed the book gently. That was not activism. That was accountability. Alito leaned back, visibly irritated. "So you're suggesting this court has failed its duty?" Crockett took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting, Your Honor, that this court's silence has been louder than any decision." The audience gasped audibly. The Chief Justice raised a hand to quiet the room, but Crockett didn't back down. "Justice Alito, you once wrote that the Constitution must be read in the light of history. Then let's read all of it, not just the parts that keep the powerful comfortable." Her words hung in the air. For a long moment, no one spoke. Even Alito's usual confidence seemed to falter. She took a small step closer to the microphone. "Every law that closes a polling station in a poor community, every district line that dilutes a voice, every rule that punishes the act of voting, all of them are quiet ways of saying the same thing. Some citizens count more than others." Then she paused. "And that," she said slowly, "is not democracy. That's design." The silence that followed was electric. Alito finally spoke, his voice low. "Congresswoman, you've made strong claims. But this court decides on law, not passion." Crockett replied gently, "Law without conscience is just power dressed in formality." The Chief Justice looked uneasy, glancing between them. Outside, cameras flashed through the tall windows. Crockett gathered her papers. "Your Honors, this isn't about left or right, and it's about right and wrong. The right to vote is the oxygen of this republic, and when you restrict it, you suffocate democracy itself." She turned back once more. "Justice Alito, you asked earlier what my constitutional argument is. It's simple. When the people lose faith that their vote matters, the Constitution loses meaning." Her voice softened to a near whisper. "And if this court won't protect that meaning, then history will remember who chose silence over service." The Chief Justice looked down. The other justices exchanged quiet glances. Alito said nothing. The camera panned across the chamber. Marble, history, power, and one woman standing alone, unshaken. Crockett lowered her head briefly, then stepped back from the lectern. Her closing words echoed in the hall like a verdict. "Justice isn't written in marble. It's written in courage." The courtroom erupted, half in applause, half in stunned silence. But no one doubted it. History had just shifted, and the Constitution had been forced to listen.